future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre Lindh.
So Tamas, let's jump into it here. We are discussing then versus now versus future player behavior today. And Tamas, obviously you come from a long background in the iGaming industry, CCO now at Playson, obviously up and coming game provider. And I'm really curious to know, as a starting point here today, like, what are some of the major differences in player behavior in the casino sphere in the last 10 years? Like, how has the behavior of the players shifted in the last decade when it comes to gameplay and so on in the casino segment?
Well, if we start from a decade ago, that's a lot of changes, I would say, because first of all, back in 10 years ago and even 5 years ago, desktop was the predominant device that people used, and by now it changed completely around. So let's say 5 years ago 75% of the player sessions was on desktop. Now it's the other way around, and in most developed countries it's 75% plus on mobile and only 25% on desktop, and that obviously resulted in shorter session length for both, you know, just how you use your mobile phone versus your desktop. So when you fire up your laptop and purposely go to a casino website, you know, you had a planned out session and that lasted 30 minutes plus usually. Yeah. Also because of the specifics of being on a computer, but also because, you know, the deposit and loading the game and everything else took a lot longer. Now everything is almost immediate, whether it's deposit, whether it's loading a game, whether it's having your next spin, everything gears towards a quicker experience. And also attention span of people in general, if you think about it, is a lot shorter. Like if you're not interested in a video that you're watching, you scroll on 10 seconds later. And this is the same in a casino. If your game is not loading in 10 seconds, you're likely to lose the player and go to another game which will load in 10 seconds, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and So you mentioned that the sessions today are shorter. So, for example, they used to be around 30 minutes. What would be like an average length of a session today, for example?
I would say from log in to log out, a casino can be very happy if a player spent more than 11, 12 minutes there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a big difference. So would you say as well that, so that obviously has to be offset somehow, but would there be more sessions than that players play instead? So, for example, you know, you mentioned the transition from desktop to mobile. Obviously, now using mobile, you have the opportunity to play on the bus. You know, you're waiting in the line in the supermarket, for example, and so on and so forth. So, does this even out in the, let's say, in the span of a player's full month? Let's say, do they still get in the same amount of playing time, or is it actually lower?
I don't think the playing time evens out. I mean, the sessions are increased, but not increased as much by the time it has decreased versus an old regular computer gaming session. So, but again, we touched on that previously, that everything is a lot quicker. Like when you deposit, it's a lot quicker. When you spin, it's a lot quicker. Yeah. Everything is a lot quicker. So the total number of spins probably even increased since then, but the actual time spent in front of a casino lobby is not the same, I don't think.
All right. And then obviously there's the regulatory side of things, where some of the regulators, they don't want the spin time to be shorter and shorter and shorter. They want to do the opposite, right? They want to increase the spin time in order to provide more entertainment in the space of time. Is this something you're faced with, these type of challenges as well from regulatory side as we go into now? How do you face these type of challenges and still able the same amount and still offer the same amount of entertainment?
It's a difficult thing for both the casino and both for the provider, because because there's only so much time a player is willing to spend in front of the device playing, especially with mobile. So it is absolutely a challenge, and different providers are trying to give different answers with small tweaks in the gameplay, directed particularly to a certain regulated market with its certain phenomenon, whether it's very low maximum bet, whether it's longer spin times. I mean, each regulated market is similar but different at the same time. But the answer really is that you try to find the specifics of that particular local market and try to understand what parts of the game players are enjoying, what they want more of, and try to fill in the useless time, so to say, with features or animations or whatever it might be, in order for them to be interested enough to stay.
Yeah, fair enough. And so then if we look at the games themselves in the last 10 years, so obviously you have to adapt to the fact that players are playing shorter sessions now compared to 10 years ago, and that and also other factors, like how has the games that you produce changed in the last decade as well, would you say, to accommodate the players' change in behavior?
Well, that's a very complex question, actually, but
you're not getting away easy today, Tamas.
but what I really think is that the biggest innovation hasn't been on the front end of games, right? It's spin times, it's the user experience, it's the user interface, everything to be self-explanatory, and this is the biggest part of innovation that has been done in the last 10 years when it comes to slot games especially. And of course there are some innovative mechanics, and 9 out of 10 will not work, and the 10th will be the next Megaways, but in reality, the player experience has to be very intuitive for the player and very rapid and very self-explanatory. And this is where I think you can get an edge on competition if you get this right.
Okay, fair enough. And also, I mean, there's like in 10 years' time, society changed a lot as well. The way we behaved 10 years ago is different from how we behave now. So I don't know if there's anything to say as well about like how culture change and how that influences game. I mean, there are some game providers now, I mean, that are trying to find their niche. For example, like I know No Limit City are trying to be a bit more edgy, let's say, and they are like pushing the boundaries a bit there. So is there anything to say as well about like the cultural differences that we go through as well, and how that influences how you create games? Like, do you jump on trends, for example, when they appear, or do you think about these type of things as well when you?
I mean, different providers take a different angle on this phenomenon. Of course, the up-and-coming generation is, and your future player is very different to what a normal casino player used to be 10 years ago. Yeah. And you have to find your way into the new generation as well. But I predominantly think, though, that again, this comes with the UX and UI rather than being edgy. For some providers, you mentioned No Limit City, I could say Push or Relax. They have done some super innovative stuff and it works for them. But based on the rule of big numbers, I would say still what people like most, and this is what we are trying to do as well, is the symbols and the gameplay is similar from that of the land-based casinos, whether it's the symbol set and whatnot, but all the rest of it, like a glove, all the UI, the UX, it enhances it and it makes a 21st century experience, very online experience, but with the feel of the classic games that were there 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. So you basically want the players to recognize a game the first time they see it, and they kind of recognize the symbols and how the game works without going too far away from this kind of core concept in order for a game to work.
But it has to be somehow intuitive for the player, whether it's the symbol set, whether it's the mechanics, whether it's the spin button being on the same place where it used to be the session before. There are all things. These are all things that play a part in it, I guess. And we've seen tremendous success with edgy product, but on the long term, we saw that players always come back to these classics, and what differentiates this offering here again goes back to the back end part of the innovation. I would say.
Yeah, and like if we put the tape back 10 years ago, I mean, if you like the likes of NetEnt and the microgamings and so on, they maybe didn't have to work as hard as you have to work today in order to produce a hit, because now you go to any operator and there's thousands of games from 100 different game suppliers, whereas back in the day you had, when I worked at Betsson, for example, BetSafe, there was Casino Red and there was Casino Black.
NetEnt and microgaming, right?
NetEnt and microgaming, that's exactly right. And those were the only two options that you had as players, and the players were very much seeking themselves to these games that they recognized, let's say. And we all know that if you go into an operator today, there's, with the launch of the seamless wallet, there's now the opportunity to play at all these different game providers. And so how does that make your life more difficult in how you actually get attention and how you succeed with a game?
I think it has to do with honesty, strangely enough. Like, as I said, we have a portfolio of 75, 80 plus games. Yeah. But to each operator, we are not saying that all the 80 games that we have are going to work for your audience. We have to pick and choose the ones based on our BI data that for their particular countries and their particular target audience will work. So we go and sit with the operator and spend some time and say, look, from what we know, these are your target markets. Please help us letting us know if there's anything else that we should know. And then we'll give you the best possible offering for you to push. And then obviously the results are going to be better because it's going to be a lot directed towards the end player and what they like in the particular region or age group. And then those 10 or 15 games are going to work super well, rather than pushing everything out, taking the space from the actual good performers and just have everything just for the sake of having them.
All right. So it's not like you're pushing out, like I said, all the 80 games that you have to all operators. You try to find these like bespoke solutions to certain operators are targeting different markets and different demographics, and then you are there to basically predict what games will work best for those individual operators.
Yeah, well, that's certainly our approach. And then obviously when it comes to regulated markets, now there's a lot of them, then it's not always all of your portfolio that is licensed for all the regulated markets. So that also comes in. And again, we are trying to make the best possible choices on what games we certify for certain regulated markets. But yeah, this is one aspect as well that reduces the offering and also presents a really good opportunity when a market regulates newly, and not all the providers will be able to act super quick on it. So then, if you manage to get your best games out to a newly regulated market, then you probably can get a little bit of an edge on the rest of the competition.
And like when you produce your titles, like I said, now you have 80 games and so on. Do you feel that, is it often that you have a feeling when you produce a game that will turn into a hit? Or do you feel sometimes that it can happen at a bit of random, where a game that you didn't expect to be popular turns out to be like the best game of the year kind of thing?
Well, we have this feeling all the time. Every time we launch a game,
it's difficult to predict, I would imagine. It's so subjective. Like, there isn't a formula to create the best game.
No, I mean, of course you can be data-driven and whatnot, but there's an element, this not very tangible element, which everyone tries to get a grasp of, whether it's the sound of the game, whether it's the background music, whether it's the math, and sometimes you you can say, okay, this is going to work probably very well, but again, very much on more of a market basis. Like, we are trying to make games that will suit most of the markets we are addressing, but at the same time, we have a strong feeling, okay, this is going to work better in Romania, or this is going to work better in Italy, and then we continue to make games based on these learnings and just refine it and see if it can address different markets at the same time.
Yeah. How much do the games differ between markets in general? So the performance of a standard game that you produce, you mentioned, like, for example, in Romania, it might perform much better than in the UK, for example. Like, how big is the differences between the demographics, and why do you think there is a difference?
Well, it's quite big, especially if you don't just think of countries but regions as well.
Yeah.
And one thing is probably what these players are used to from the past, especially with regulated market that comes with the heritage of land-based and shop style slots. So a lot of players were growing up with a particular style, and then this will be in the back of their mind when they are choosing an online slot as well, I imagine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes something completely the opposite happens, and it just works for some particular reason. Maybe there was a big win video posted on YouTube and it became viral. There can be all sorts of things that skew your data-driven approach, but I think it's a good starting point to be data-driven and look at the performance of the games previously when creating a new slot. But at the same time, there is this again, little bit of je ne sais pas, like nobody really knows what it is.
It's like the magic touch in a sense. It's very interesting in general and very subjective. I was going to ask as well. I remember it was Todd Haushalter who talked about as well, like how do you create a hit and so on with a game. And as well, like, he was trying to put these like magic touches in, like at what point in the process does a game become great. And he talked as well about just the fact of a team having the ability to just throw ideas around, when you sit around at the table and letting the creativity flow, to say, not to hold back that creative process. Like, when you guys discuss ideas for games at Playson, like, how does that like creative process look like, and how does it work?
I'm probably not the best person to address this, because I'm
the
trying to
side, of course,
exactly. I'm trying to sell the games, but at the same time, what I can say is that we, in the concept phase of the game, there's a lot of discussion, and even smallest things that you wouldn't think that matters, just like 1.5% of the RTP taken out from the base game put to the bonus game can make such a difference. So again, devil is in the detail in that regard. Like, we have a basic direction where we want to take the game, whether it's the graphics, whether it's the maths, whether it's the volatility. We take this into consideration, but then a newer and better idea comes in, then by all means we'll try it. And our prototyping tool works day in, day out, finding the best symbols for that particular style of game. So it's the small things that matter, but there's a lot of brainstorming behind these really small details.
Yeah, for sure. So something I'm really curious about as well, Tamas, is in the digital entertainment sphere, if I look at my own habits, the leisure time that I have, sometimes we talked about this before, I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, for example, or I would watch Netflix or any of these other things. When you look at your competitors and things like this, do you see Netflix as your competitor as well? Or like in the sense that you are fighting for the same time, kind of thing?
Exactly. I was going to say exactly that the time element is where these different entertainment channels are competition for gaming in general, because Because people who manage to spend 10 euros on Netflix, they will be able to deposit 20 euros and play games on online casino as well, I imagine. So it's not on the money side, but on the time side, certainly. And this is why it's so important to have this seamless experience from beginning to end, whether it's on the operator side or whether it's just in the slot machine, is that it actually engages players, it actually entertains players, and they want to come back, even though there's the next season of Vikings out, they still want to come and have their daily dose of their favorite slot machine because they find it fascinating, and it's a different form of entertainment.
Yeah. That's, I guess, I mean, speaking about Netflix, nowadays the IPs are being leveraged as well. Of course, I think that there is like a Viking slot or whatever, and there is like the Narcos slot and whatnot. Is that something you are thinking about as well, to kind of to leverage IPs in order to create titles and so on, or you're focusing more on your proprietary?
It's
titles?
Not particularly in style with the Playson games today, so I don't think we have deeply considered this. No. It's a really good stunt for marketing purposes more than anything else. Like if you look at all the slots with an IP, very little percent has actually made a lot of money for the provider it was made by. However, there was a lot of talk about it. All the operators were super curious to see these, and there are exceptions to the rule, like Vikings, as you were saying, that was also commercially very successful. But more than anything else, it's excitement. It's getting new players just because they have seen a slot machine with a well-known film or series IP. This is where I find there's value. But generally speaking, a slot machine will be good because it has strong math. It's flawlessly executed, much rather than what the symbols are.
Yeah. So IPs are overrated for the sake of being IPs.
To monetize them, yes. To have good marketing visibility with it, it works.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And speaking of which, it'd be interesting to know as well, Tamas, like what other game providers, game studios is there anyone you look up to that is not Playson?
No, absolutely, and for different providers for different reasons. But as we were mentioning, I really like the niche approach of the guys at No Limit, because they have brought in a different flavor to the slot market. So one company that I would definitely say is worth looking is No Limit, but there is a number of them. Relax and Push had fantastic titles that were a bit outside of the ordinary. They were still slots, and mechanics can be different and everything, but there is the element of innovation, and sometimes a little bit differently to how we approach it, but this is the reason why we admire them.
Mm-hmm. And is this something you talk about as well, like looking at what others are doing and kind of building on this? Again, you're not on the product side, so perhaps not the best thing, but how do you approach innovation in Playtech in general? Is it a lot to look at others, or are you focusing on your own side? Again, you're focusing on UX UI, that's your niche type of thing. Explain a bit more like how you approach innovation.
Obviously everyone takes inspiration from the titles that has worked well, whether it's the math, whether it's something else. I don't think any provider can say that they haven't looked at the competition and try to implement certain things that work. But what we are trying to do is basically have the player-proven concepts like hold and win, and add an extra piece of innovation which makes it a Playson original. So it's not like a totally different game to any other hold and win game, but there's an extra little bit which nobody else offers, and for us this has worked very well.
Like you're saying, you don't need to reinvent the wheel like every time you produce a game just to make it different for the sake of it being different. What you're saying is, if you can get the UX UI right, down to a pulp, the user finds the experience is nice and pleasant and recognizable. That is the core, basically, that you want to have in a successful game.
Absolutely, and then there's cherry on the top with some nice gamification tools and promo tools which we have invested in heavily in the last couple of years. There's again the spin time and just the server speed. Basically, it's such an important factor that anywhere in the globe the player is, it has to be a super seamless, quick, enjoyable experience.
And now as well, like I see a trend emerging in the industry now where the operators are growing to the point where they want to control their own services around their company. So in the US, this is very common, for example, that there are game studios that are acquired and that there are more and more operators are producing their own games in order to again control their own games and services. Do you see this being problematic as a standalone game studio going forward? Do you think that standalone game studios will find a harder and harder time to get more visibility on the operators?
Well, yes and no. Yes, from the sense that obviously if an operator creates their own games, then it will be in their best interest to push it. But the online gaming industry is increasing 15, 20, 25% year on year. So there's enough opportunities, in my opinion, that we can, as a slots provider, address rather than worrying about the operators that want to push their own content. They will still have us as well. Maybe sometimes not as dominantly, but if our games are performing good enough on their sides, then there's no reason for them not to push our games just as much as they do their own.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, there was just the other day the deal between Relax and Kindred was closed, obviously, and there's been other acquisitions in this space. But what's your expectations and predictions now as we go into the future, Tamas, on the future of player behavior, and also how you as a company will continue to evolve? How will the industry continue to evolve? What's your thoughts now as we move forward?
Well, we can say now that the industry starts to mature, and then it's a natural thing for all these M&A activities to happen, because the more mature the industry is, the more big players there will be on the market. And obviously, at one point, when their organic growth slows down, then they will start buying interesting prospects. So obviously, this will continue, I think, especially with the US being such a hot topic and all the big investment firms in the US looking at gaming. This is something for sure to continue to happen. But at the same time, we are talking about the US, but we don't talk so much about Brazil, for instance, which is going to be, when it becomes regulated, it will be the sixth biggest market for gaming in the world. And there are plenty opportunities around the corner besides the US that can be addressed. So from the gaming world's point of view, this is very interesting. Latin America, Africa are all markets that have huge potential, and we only scratched the surface of it so far, I would say. And when it comes to player behavior, I think there will still be appetite from the players to just play slots, sit down, do their 50, 100, 150, hopefully even more spins on the games, and stay there. But then, for example, what Evolution is doing is quite admirable with all the game shows, and I'm sure with the acquisition of NetEnt, Tiger, and BTG, they're also going to get involved a lot more with the hybrid between live casino and slots, which will be something very interesting to see. Probably have to ask Todd rather than myself how this will play out, but I am sure there will be a lot of interesting crossbreeds between live and slots.
Yeah. Do you think you'll always focus on the core of the slot machines, or would you consider as well to branch into other areas like live, for example?
Never say never. I mean, we have RGS roulette and blackjack product, but this is so minor in our portfolio that we haven't looked at venturing it just yet. But if the right opportunity comes, as I said, never say no, but not in the immediate future, surely.
Yeah, fair enough. And what do you think now, like, in the looking forward as well, Tamas, like in terms of emerging technologies coming along? There's 5G, obviously, connectivity, which enables users to do more with their phones and so on. Do you think there's any emerging technologies in the industry that will help you guys to produce better games?
It's really the speed of internet that is of biggest help. Like, strangely enough, for example, not only desktops, but how do you call these things that you have in front of you? iPads.
Yes.
No, tablets was the word I was looking for.
So more generic.
So they are not as popular. So phones are going to be the dominant device that people will use. So obviously, how you use the full screen, how are you going to use the audio capabilities of the more modern phones? And obviously with 5G and with internet being faster and faster and getting to, again, markets which obviously have less powerful internet at the moment. This is where in the immediate future, I think, opportunities are. Yeah. But of course, there will be, the virtual glasses and all that. But this will take a long time until they become a habit, right? Yeah. I mean, again, the reason is that people want seamless, really quick experience. At the moment, you take your virtual glass, you put it on, you switch it on, then you go to the casino. Maybe 0.5% of the casinos are actually supporting it at the moment. Yeah. So it's not an experience for the 21st century person at the moment. When these technologies will be refined, there will be ample amounts of opportunities that will be ahead of us, but that's not the immediate future, I don't think.
No, it's interesting. I mean, like you're saying, the connectivity is an interesting part, and every time Apple releases an update to their iPhones or their iPad, the industry wins, right? Because when you update your phone from the iPhone 6 to iPhone 13 or whatnot, all of a sudden you have the opportunity to do more with your phone and play richer games than, for example, and be more entertained.
No, absolutely. And it's true for any sort of entertainment that you try to do online. So I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting part, and I think in terms of emerging technologies, there's so much happening as well. But I think when we talk about emerging technologies, the fallback is always you start thinking about like AR glasses or VR glasses, and that's like the perception you have of like the emerging technologies that will change the future. And I think those have quite cool potential. But I think like looking at the VR space, for example, I got the Oculus Rift, the headset, the first day it came, and this was, what was this now, like 7 years ago maybe?
How many times have you used it?
Yeah, and that's the question. Exactly, that is the question. Everyone loves a good VR demo at conferences, but it turns into a novelty after 20 minutes. It's like you play it, and then it's not so interesting anymore, let's say. And that's exactly what happened to me. I'm a massive fan of like anything that is forward thinking, and I really try to get into like the VR world and so on. But it's hard to stick with it. Like most people, they get the headset, they play it a couple of times, and then they just put it aside. Now the question is, obviously, Facebook has bought Oculus, and the future vision for these VR headsets are quite comprehensive. Nowadays, when I got my Oculus, it was with a clunky cord, and it had to be plugged into the computer, and it was really difficult to start everything and so on. Now they are wireless, of course, the Quest 2, and I think they have gotten a little bit further, but it's still very, very far away from mainstream adoption. And I wonder if it's ever going to be adopted by the mainstream, the VR sets. I think that the AR glasses will have a more prominent future, because you wear the glasses as if you're wearing normal glasses, let's say, and you interact with that. And the question is how then the industry potentially can leverage technology like that, just like we switch from desktop to mobile. Maybe in 7, 8, 9 years time, there will be a transition from mobile to glasses, because the interface is just easier,
Exactly, that's very interesting. I think someone, if I'm not mistaken, it was Sam Brown who was doing this sort of prediction in this very same podcast, and I remember to the date. So, it has ample amount of opportunities. Like, let's be outside of the casino world a little bit, but imagine a world where you can bet on anything just with having your glasses on. Like you walk, and if you have a particular app in your glasses, you'll be able to bet on, okay, what color shirt is the next man I see with my glasses going to wear. And it can be a 24/7 betting experience for you if you want it that way, and if it will be obviously allowed by the regulators, which I doubt it will. But there is a lot of opportunities, and it's only your imagination that will give you the borders. There's a lot that can happen, but as I said, in the short term future, I do think it's going to be more the accessibility and the continuous improvements of well working ways of doing games and distributing games.
Fair enough. And also, like, how do you see the regulatory landscape evolving as well? You mentioned there's opportunities in Brazil and Africa. And it's a funny thing, we forget how populated some of the African nations are. Like Nigeria, that a lot of people in the industry talk about. It's like 200 million people in Nigeria. It's crazy. I mean, but their behavior is different as well. Like there's massive liquidity, but their bet size is much smaller, for example. Is this something you're thinking about as well? Let's say from a regulatory point of view, I guess the question is in twofold. Regulatory wise, like, how do you see the landscape developing? And then secondly, these new demographics like Brazil, Nigeria, potentially Asia. How much do you have to think about creating games that are specifically for these demographics, as we are usually used to producing games from a European perspective?
Well, it's again a tricky question, because we are pretty busy with addressing all the 18, 19 regulated markets we are already present on, right? So there, all the regulatory changes, they demand a lot of work on the tech side of things, and also understanding what implications they have towards players' gameplay and whatnot. So from one side, it is difficult because it requires a lot of extra work in order for you to comply and in order to be successful in this market. But as I probably previously mentioned, it also presents a big opportunity, because if you are quick to do these changes, and if you are quick to address the actual target market in a good way, where players will enjoy your content, there will be a lack of content for some time until everyone catches up. And different providers have different focus markets, so probably a market that is important for us is not as important to our competitors. Exactly. So there will be additional players and additional playtime that we can then capitalize on. So as much as it is a burden from all the tech and legal point of view, that is also a really good opportunity for us to broaden our player base.
Fantastic, Tamas. I mean, it's been really interesting to dig into the player behavior of the past, present, future here. And just to round off a little bit today, I'd just love to hear a little bit more. I mean, Playson, you mentioned, I mean, you seem to be bigger than the perception is of the industry, and I'd love to hear more about the ambition of Playson here as we go into the future as well. What are you aiming to produce as a company?
We would like to be a product leader in our space, obviously, and by getting there in a way which is satisfying for the players and for our colleagues as well. We are a 100% remote friendly workplace, and we take really good care of our colleagues. And this is almost as important for us as just being super successful. But obviously, main goal is the more successful we are, the more interesting things we can afford to our colleagues and for the players. So these two things go hand by hand, I guess. And we really aim to be a provider that is in the forefront of the slot category. and at the same time have fun while we are doing it, and make sure that that players and colleagues have fun too.
That's all that matters at the end of the day, I think. Just having fun and producing what you love doing and working hard. I think that's a good triangle to follow. Fantastic, Tamas. Is there anything we left out today? Is there anything more we'd like to add?
Well, there's a lot of things that we.
When
it comes to innovation, there's a million things that we can talk about. But I think we have covered a lot for the short time that we had. So
yeah. Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Tamas, for coming on today. And we were saying before here, we became color coordinated today. And we even with the jungle that we are in here, the Maltese jungle, we are color coordinated today. So I hope we are visible in the cameras today. But yeah, thank you so much, Tamas. It's good to see you again. And I'm looking forward to see you tagging me next as well.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Awesome.